The Sol System Alliance Academy buzzed with excitement as students lined the hallways, eager to catch a glimpse of their newest visiting professor. Rumors had spread quickly through the campus that Professor Zixtrel, the famous Valtraxian physicist and puzzle master, would be teaching at the academy for the semester. Humans had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, and many alien species still viewed them as primitive newcomers who had stumbled upon faster-than-light travel. Through sheer luck rather than scientific understanding, Liam Carter adjusted his uniform as he hurried to the main auditorium. He was running late after staying up most of the night reading everything he could find about Valtraxian culture. At 22, Liam was in his third year at the academy, maintaining decent but unremarkable grades. His professors often noted that, while he understood the concepts, his approach to problem-solving was unconventional and sometimes frustratingly human. "Did you hear what they call him back on Veltrax?" asked a voice as Liam slipped into a seat near the back of the auditorium. It was his roommate, Gary Phillips, saving him a spot as promised. "The puzzle tyrant," Liam replied with a grin. "Apparently he's made senior scientists from 17 different species cry with his tests," Gary groaned. "Great, just what we needed. Another alien professor who thinks humans are too dumb to tie their own shoes." Their conversation halted as the Academy's director, Admiral Susan Lewis, took the stage. "Students and faculty, it is my distinct honor to welcome Professor Zixtrel of the Valtraxian Science Authority to our humble academy." The alien that glided onto the stage moved with the characteristic fluid grace of the Valtraxians. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with 4 slender arms and a body covered in pale blue scales that shimmered under the lights, Professor Zixtrel made an imposing figure. His 4 eyes positioned in a diamond pattern on his elongated face scanned the room with obvious curiosity. "I thank you for this welcome," the professor said, his voice translated through the small device attached to what passed for a collar on his shimmering formal robe. "It is most interesting to observe your institution. I have studied the educational methods of many species, but humans remain something of a puzzle to me." The professor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which Liam recognized as the Veltraxian equivalent of a thoughtful pause. "You see, most species follow predictable learning patterns. The Arcturians with their 15 digits excel at multidimensional mathematics. The Gorgons, with their hive mind, process information collectively, but humans ... He made a sound that the translator didn't catch. "Humans are inconsistent. You sometimes solve problems that should be beyond your computational abilities, yet struggle with concepts a Veltraxian child would grasp instantly." Liam shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This wasn't the first time he'd heard this assessment of humanity. Most alien species found humans simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. Species that had somehow survived despite their biological limitations. "To test my theories about human problem-solving capabilities, I will be conducting an experiment during my stay," Professor Zixtrel continued. "I have brought with me my orbital labyrinth, a puzzle of my own design that tests one's understanding of physics in zero-gravity environments." A hologram appeared above the stage, showing a complex 3-dimensional maze with rotating components. Liam leaned forward, instantly intrigued by the beautiful, intricate design. "I will hold a competition. 1 week from today. Any student who can successfully navigate the labyrinth will receive my personal recommendation to the Galactic Science Council's internship program." A collective gasp went through the auditorium. The Galactic Science Council rarely accepted human applicants, and an alien professor's recommendation would carry enormous weight. "I should warn you," the professor added, his translator conveying a hint of smugness, "that no being has ever solved my labyrinth on their first attempt. The current record is held by an Arcturian mathematician who required 37 attempts. After the assembly, the academy hallways filled with excited chatter as students debated whether to enter the competition. Many were intimidated by the professor's reputation, but others saw it as a rare opportunity to prove human worth to the galactic community. "Are you going to try?" Gary asked as they walked to their physics class. Liam nodded. "Of course. How could I not? You know the odds are against us, right? The professor practically said humans are too stupid to solve it. He didn't say we couldn't solve it, Liam corrected. He just finds us unpredictable. Maybe that's an advantage. Next week, Liam divided his time between classes and researching everything he could find about Veltraxian puzzles. He learned that Veltraxians valued mathematical precision above all else and designed their puzzles to reward methodical approaches. Most species tackled Veltraxian puzzles by calculating every variable and planning each move in advance, the night. Before the competition, Liam found himself unable to sleep. He paced around his small dormitory room, mentally reviewing what he knew about zero-gravity physics. Unlike many of his classmates who had grown up in space stations, Liam had been born on Earth and still found zero-G environments challenging. His instructors often commented that he relied too much on his Earth-based intuition instead of proper calculations. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, he muttered to himself as he finally climbed into bed. The morning of the competition arrived with a buzz of nervous energy throughout the academy. 67 students had registered to attempt the orbital labyrinth, a mixture of humans and the various alien species studying at the Earth-based academy as part of exchange programs. The zero-gravity chamber had been specially prepared for the event. When Liam entered, he saw Professor Zixterl floating at the center, making final adjustments to his puzzle. The orbital labyrinth was even more impressive in person than in the hologram, a beautiful, complex construction of transparent material arranged in concentric rings, each rotating independently. "Students, approach and observe," the professor called out. "The objective is simple. Guide your probe from the outer edge to the central chamber without touching any walls. You will each have one attempt today." Liam watched as the first competitors took their turns. The alien students approached the puzzle with meticulous calculation, programming precise trajectories into their probes. Most failed within seconds, their probes crashing into the transparent barriers as a ring shifted unexpectedly. Even the Arcturian exchange student, despite his species' reputation for mathematical brilliance, only managed to navigate through 3 of the 7 rings before failing. As Liam waited for his turn, he noticed something none of the others seemed to be paying attention to. The entire labyrinth had a subtle motion to it, beyond the rotation of individual rings. It was almost like it was breathing, expanding, and contracting in a nearly imperceptible rhythm. "Fascinating," he whispered to himself. "It's not just a maze, it's a system." When Liam's turn came to attempt the orbital labyrinth, many of his fellow students had already failed their tries and now watched from the observation area with expressions of disappointment and frustration on their faces. Gary gave him a thumbs up. As Liam floated toward the control station where he would guide his probe, Professor Zixterl hovered nearby, his 4 eyes blinking in that distinct Veltraxian pattern that suggested mild interest. "Mr. Carter, I believe you are next," the professor said, his translator making his voice sound flat and emotionless. "You may begin whenever you are ready." Liam nodded and took position at the controls, but instead of immediately launching his probe like the others had done, he continued to observe the labyrinth. The transparent rings rotated at different speeds, creating what looked like a random pattern to most observers, but Liam had spent the past few minutes watching carefully, and he was now certain that there was an underlying rhythm to the entire system. "Is there a problem, Mr. Carter?" Professor Zixterl asked after nearly a minute had passed. "No, Professor, I'm just watching." The alien scales shifted color slightly, a sign of confusion or perhaps irritation. "Watching will not solve the puzzle. The solution requires precise calculation and execution." Several of the alien students made sounds that translated roughly to laughter. Human intuition was often a source of amusement among the more mathematically advanced species. Liam ignored them and continued to study the labyrinth. The outer ring completed 1 rotation every 12 seconds. The next ring inward took 17 seconds. The pattern continued inward with seemingly random rotation periods, yet as Liam watched, he noticed that the entire structure seemed to pulse subtly, like a heartbeat every 43 seconds. There was a moment when the rotations aligned in a particular way. "Your time is limited, Mr. Carter," the professor reminded him. Liam finally nodded and reached for the controls, the probe, a small sphere with maneuvering thrusters. Floated at the starting position, he took a deep breath and activated it. The other students expected him to do what they had done. Carefully calculate a path through the first gate, then stop to recalculate for the second, and so on instead. Liam sent the probe into a slow spin and directed it toward the outermost ring. "What is he doing?" one of the Arcturian students asked loudly. "The spin will make precise navigation impossible." Professor Zixtral's four eyes widened slightly as he watched. Liam's unconventional approach interesting, most curious. The spinning probe approached the first rotating gate. Liam made a small adjustment to the spin axis, but otherwise kept the probe moving at a steady pace as the gate rotated. The probe slipped through the opening without touching the sides. A murmur went through the watching students. Most of them had managed to get through the first gate too, but they had done so with careful timing and precise movements. Liam's approach seemed almost reckless by comparison. The probe continued its spinning journey toward the second gate. Liam made another small adjustment, and again the probe passed through without incident. As it approached the third gate, where most of the human students had failed, Liam increased the spin rate slightly. "He's matching the rotation," whispered Amanda Wells, one of the top physics students in Liam's class. "It's like he's making the probe dance with the gates." Professor Zixtral had moved closer now. His attention fully captured by Liam's approach, his scales had shifted to a deeper blue, which Liam knew indicated intense concentration. The professor had expected all the humans to fail at the puzzle, just as the humans from the 17 other space academies had done when he visited them. But this approach was entirely new. The fourth gate was particularly tricky because it rotated on two axes simultaneously. Most of the alien students had crashed at this point, unable to calculate the complex trajectory needed to pass through safely. Liam, however, adjusted his probe's spin to match the gate's dual rotation. The probe wobbled slightly as it passed through, coming dangerously close to the edge, but it made it without touching. By now, even the students who had initially laughed at Liam's approach were watching in stunned silence as the probe approached the fifth gate. Liam's face showed intense concentration. His hands moved over the controls with subtle, gentle movements, almost like a musician playing an instrument. "Look at how he's moving," Gary whispered to Amanda. "It's like he's feeling his way through rather than calculating." The fifth gate presented a new challenge. It periodically reversed its rotation direction. Liam had anticipated this from his observations and timed his approach perfectly. The probe passed through during the brief moment when the gate slowed to change direction. Sixth gate was moving faster than the others, making timing especially difficult. Liam adjusted his probe speed and spin once more. The probe slipped through with barely any clearance, causing several students to gasp. Now only the seventh and final gate remained between the probe and the central chamber. This gate was the most complex of all, combining multiple rotation patterns that seemed to follow no logical sequence. Most observers saw only chaos in its movement. But Liam had noticed something during his initial observation. Every 43 seconds, there was a pattern. He waited, keeping the probe spinning at a steady rate until he saw the pattern beginning. Then, with a series of quick adjustments, he sent the probe forward. The spinning motion created a gyroscopic stability that carried it through the final gate and into the central chamber. The zero-gravity room fell completely silent. Professor Zixtral floated motionless, all four of his eyes fixed on the central chamber where Liam's probe now rested. His scales had turned an almost white shade of blue, a color Liam had never seen on a Veltraxian before. "Impossible," one of the alien students finally said, breaking the silence. "Not impossible," Professor Zixtral replied, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions in his voice. "Merely improbable, and yet it happened." He turned all four eyes toward Liam. "Mr. Carter, in all my years of presenting this puzzle across the galaxy, I have never seen anyone approach it as you have. The mathematical solution requires calculating the precise moment to pass through each gate." "But you changed the nature of the problem itself," Liam shrugged, suddenly self-conscious with everyone staring at him. "The gates all move in patterns. The whole system has a rhythm. I just had to find it and move with it." The professor's scales slowly returned to their normal blue shade, a most human explanation. "And yet, You succeeded where others failed. You will receive my recommendation to the Galactic Science Council as promised as Liam floated back to join his fellow students. He was met with a mixture of amazed stares and congratulatory pats on the back. Gary looked at him with wide eyes. How did you know that would work? Liam smiled. I didn't know for sure, but I noticed something about the puzzle that reminded me of dancing when you dance with a partner. You don't fight against their movements, you move with them. Professor Zixtrel watched the human students with new interest. Perhaps there was more to human intuition than he had initially believed, perhaps. In their strange, unpredictable way, humans had something valuable to offer the galactic community after all. News of Liam's success with the orbital labyrinth spread quickly throughout the Sol System Alliance Academy. By the following morning, students and faculty alike were discussing the human who had solved the famous Veltraxian puzzle on his first attempt. Liam found himself the center of attention as he walked into the campus dining hall for breakfast. There he is, someone said as Liam entered the room. Several students looked up from their meals, and a few even applauded. Gary waved him over to a table where he sat with Amanda and a few other physics students. Our local celebrity arrives, he said with a grin. How does it feel to be famous? Liam set down his tray and shrugged. Weird, I just solved the puzzle. It's not like I discovered faster than light travel. Just a puzzle? Amanda shook her head. Liam, that puzzle has stumped some of the brightest minds in the galaxy, and you solved it with a method no one had ever tried before. Professor Zixtrel has been talking about it with the other faculty all morning. Before Liam could respond, a tall figure approached their table. It was Professor Zixtrel, his blue scales shimmering under the dining hall lights. The students at the table immediately sat up straighter. Mr. Carter, I wonder if I might have a word with you after you finish your meal, the professor said. There are some matters I would like to discuss regarding your solution to the orbital labyrinth. Liam nodded. Of course, Professor. When Zixtrel had moved away, Gary leaned forward. What do you think he wants to talk about? Probably the recommendation to the Galactic Science Council, Amanda suggested. That's what he promised the winner. Liam finished his breakfast quickly and found Professor Zixtrel waiting for him in the hallway outside the dining hall. The professor gestured for Liam to follow him, and they made their way to one of the Academy's research labs. The lab was empty except for a holographic projection of the orbital labyrinth. Floating in the center of the room, Zixtrel activated a control panel and the hologram began to move, showing a replay of Liam's solution from the previous day. I have studied your approach all night, the professor said, his 4 eyes fixed on the spinning probe as it navigated through the gates. It is most fascinating. You see, the mathematical solution requires calculating each gate's position at the exact moment of passage, a computational challenge that most species approach with increasing levels of precision. The professor paused the hologram and turned to face Liam. But you did not attempt to calculate the positions at all, did you? Liam shook his head. Not exactly. I noticed that the whole system had a kind of rhythm to it. It wasn't just 7 separate gates rotating independently. There was a pattern to how they moved together. Zixtrel's scales shifted to a lighter shade of blue. Yes, that is precisely what makes this so interesting. You perceive the labyrinth as a unified system rather than 7 distinct obstacles. This is not how Veltraxians or most other species would approach the problem. The professor restarted the hologram and they watched the spinning probe dance through the labyrinth once more. By spinning your probe, you created a gyroscopic stability that made it more resistant to perturbation, and by matching your spin rate to the rhythm of the system, you essentially harmonized with the labyrinth rather than fighting against it. It just felt right, Liam said simply. Like when you're swimming in the ocean, you don't fight against the waves you move with them. Professor Zixtrel made a sound that the translator didn't catch. A very human analogy, yet surprisingly apt. I have been teaching physics for over 60 years and I have presented this puzzle to students on dozens of worlds. Never has anyone approached it as you did. The professor deactivated the hologram and moved to a desk where he picked up a small data crystal. As promised, this contains my formal recommendation to the Galactic Science Council for your internship application. The transport leaves in 3 standard weeks. I suggest you prepare your research proposal before then. Liam accepted the crystal with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Thank you, Professor, this means a lot." "There's something else," Zixtrol added, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "I have submitted a request to your academic board. I wish to conduct a study on human intuitive physics with you as my primary subject if you are willing." "Me?" Liam blinked in surprise, "but I'm not even. At the top of my class there are students with much better grades." "Grades measure one's ability to follow established paths of thinking," the professor replied. "I am interested in how humans sometimes find new paths entirely. Your species has a curious ability to perceive patterns and relationships that more mathematically advanced species often miss. This may be linked to your evolutionary history as creatures who had to navigate complex natural environments over the next week, Professor." Zixtrol worked with Liam on a series of increasingly complex physics problems, each designed to test different aspects of human intuition. The professor was particularly interested in how Liam approached problems involving motion dynamics and field interactions. Other students began to take notice of these special sessions. Some were jealous that Liam had received so much attention from the famous visiting professor, but most were simply curious about what the Veltraxian was trying to discover. "He had me try to predict the path of particles in a chaotic field yesterday," Liam told Gary and Amanda as they studied together in the library. "I couldn't calculate it exactly, but I could see the general flow pattern it reminded me of." "How leaves move in a stream," Amanda looked up from her quantum mechanics textbook. "That's exactly what makes you different from the rest of us. You're always making these weird connections to everyday things instead of just working through the equations. The professor seems to think that's valuable," Liam said. Gary nodded. "Maybe it is. Think about it. Humans are newcomers to galactic science. We're centuries behind species like the Veltraxians in pure mathematical knowledge, so maybe our advantage is that we see things differently." Word of Liam's work with Professor Zixtrol eventually reached Admiral Lewis, the Academy director. She called both of them to her office to discuss the implications. "Professor, I understand you've been conducting special research with Mr. Carter," she said as they sat across from her desk. "May I ask what you've discovered?" Zixtrol's scales rippled thoughtfully. "Admiral, I believe I have identified something quite remarkable about human cognition. Humans appear to process physical relationships in a way that is fundamentally different from most spacefaring species. You seem to internalize the behavior of physical systems through a form of pattern recognition that operates alongside your mathematical reasoning. Is that unusual?" Admiral Lewis asked. "Extremely." The professor replied. "Most advanced species rely primarily on mathematical modeling to understand physics. As their science progresses, intuition is typically replaced by computation, but humans retain this dual approach even as your mathematical abilities advance." The Admiral looked at Liam. "And how does this relate to Mr. Carter's solution to your puzzle?" "His approach demonstrates the potential value of this human cognitive trait," Zixtrol explained. "By perceiving the rhythmic nature of the system as a whole, he found a solution that was both more elegant and more efficient than the standard computational approach. This suggests that humans may have unique contributions to make to galactic science, particularly in fields involving complex dynamic systems." As Liam left the Admiral's office that day, he felt a new sense of purpose. Perhaps being human in a galaxy of mathematically superior species wasn't a disadvantage after all. Perhaps it was simply a different way of seeing the universe. As the day of Liam's departure for the Galactic Science Council internship approached, he spent most of his time preparing with Professor Zixtrol. The Veltraxian had become something of a mentor to him, guiding him through the complex protocols and expectations of the galactic scientific community. "Remember that at the council you will represent not just yourself, but your entire species," the professor said as they reviewed Liam's research proposal together. "Many members still view humans as primitive newcomers. This is your opportunity to change that perception." Liam nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. No pressure then. The professor's scales rippled in what Liam had come to recognize as the Veltraxian equivalent of a smile. "You have something valuable to offer, Liam. Your human perspective may help solve problems that have stumped other species for centuries." The research proposal they had developed together focused on applying human intuitive physics to long-standing Galactic challenges, particularly in the field of stellar dynamics where traditional computational approaches had reached their limits. Liam had suggested approaches based on fluid dynamics as observed in Earth's oceans and weather patterns, drawing connections that seemed obvious to him but revolutionary to the Veltraxian physicist 2 days before his scheduled departure. Liam received an unexpected message. The Galactic Science Council had sent a representative to the Academy to evaluate him personally before his arrival at their headquarters. Professor Zixterol informed him that this was highly unusual and likely indicated that his application had attracted significant attention. The council representative arrived the next morning, a tall Arcturian named Dr. Zenta, whose 15 fingers moved constantly as if performing invisible calculations. Liam met him in one of the Academy's conference rooms with Professor Zixterol present as well. "Mr. Carter," Dr. Zenta said after the formal introductions, "your application has caused quite a stir at the council. Professor Zixterol's recommendation carries considerable weight, but some members remain skeptical that a human could contribute meaningfully to our work." Liam tried to keep his expression neutral despite the slight. "I understand the skepticism, Dr. Zenta, but I hope to prove my worth through my work." The Arcturian's fingers continued their complex dance. "To that end, I have been authorized to conduct an assessment. Before your arrival at headquarters, we have prepared a physics challenge for you to attempt today." Professor Zixterol's scales darkened slightly. "This is highly irregular. Dr. Zenta, the council typically accepts my recommendations without such additional testing. These are unusual circumstances," the Arcturian replied. "This would be only the third human ever admitted to the council's internship program. The first 2 were not particularly successful." Liam leaned forward. "What's the challenge?" Dr. Zenta activated a holographic projector on the conference table, revealing a complex system of particles moving through what appeared to be multiple overlapping force fields. "This is a simulation of a phenomenon we discovered in the corona of a binary star system near Arcturus. We have been unable to predict the long-term behavior of these particles, despite applying our most advanced computational models." Liam studied the hologram with interest. The particles moved in strange looping patterns, sometimes clustering together before dispersing again. Their behavior seemed chaotic, yet there were hints of underlying order. "The challenge is simple," Dr. Zenta continued. "Predict where this group of particles will be after 1,000 simulation cycles." Professor Zixterol's eyes widened. "That would require calculating the interactions of thousands of particles across multiple field gradients. It is a problem that normally requires days of supercomputer time, yet you claim humans have a special intuition for such systems," the Arcturian replied. "Let us see if Mr. Carter can demonstrate this ability." Liam continued to watch the hologram, feeling a familiar sense of recognition stir within him. "The particles, they remind me of something." He reached out and rotated the hologram, looking at the system from different angles, trying to see the bigger picture rather. Then focusing on individual particles as the simulation ran, he began to notice patterns the way certain groups of particles always maintained similar relationships to each other even as they moved through the force fields. "It's like a school of fish," he said almost to himself. Dr. Zenta's many-fingered hands paused their movement. "Explain." Liam looked up. "On Earth, fish often swim in schools, groups that move together. They don't calculate their positions. They follow simple rules about maintaining distance from their neighbors while also responding to currents and avoiding predators. The result looks complex, but it emerges from simple interactions." He turned back to the hologram. "These particles are doing something similar. They're responding to each other and to the force fields following relatively simple rules that create complex behavior." Liam adjusted the simulation settings, accelerating it and watching how the patterns evolved. "There's another thing about schools of fish. They sometimes form these spinning formations we call bait balls, especially when threatened. The whole group rotates together, as if to confirm his thinking. The particles in the simulation began to form a spiraling cluster as they encountered a particularly strong region of the force field. "I think I see where this is going," Liam said with growing excitement. "After 1,000 cycles, the particles will have formed 3 main clusters here, here, and here." He pointed to 3 different regions of the simulation space, with a counter-rotating spiral formation at the center. Dr. Zenta stared at him. That is impossible. You cannot know that without calculating the trajectories of each particle. I'm not calculating individual trajectories, Liam explained. I'm looking at the behavior of the system as a whole. The particles are self-organizing, following patterns similar to those we see in many natural systems on Earth. Professor Zixtrel moved closer to the hologram. Run the simulation forward, Dr. Zenta. Let us see if Mr. Carter's prediction is accurate. The Arcturian hesitated, then adjusted the controls. The hologram blurred as the simulation accelerated, particles swirling and flowing through the force fields in complex patterns. When it finally stopped at the 1000th cycle, the result was almost exactly as Liam had predicted. 3 distinct clusters had formed with a spiraling formation at the center. Dr. Zenta's 15 fingers went completely still for perhaps the first time since he had arrived. Extraordinary. How did you do this? Liam shrugged. I just recognized the pattern. It's similar to systems I've observed before, not with particles, but with living creatures. Water currents, weather formations, even crowds of people moving through confined spaces, they all follow similar principles. The Arcturian turned to Professor Zixtrel. You were correct about him. His approach is unlike anything I have seen before. Most species become less intuitive as their science advances, relying increasingly on pure calculation, but humans seem to maintain this pattern recognition ability alongside their developing mathematical skills. It is why I believe Mr. Carter will be valuable to the Council. The professor replied. He sees connections that our more analytical methods might miss. Dr. Zenta nodded. I will report this to the Council and recommend that Mr. Carter's internship be upgraded to a research fellowship. His perspective may be particularly valuable in our work on stellar dynamics and potentially in other fields as well. As the Arcturian left, Liam turned to Professor Zixtrel. Did that really just happen? The professor's scales had lightened to an almost silver blue. Indeed, it did. You have impressed one of the Council's most rigorous evaluators. A research fellowship is a significant honor, Liam. One rarely offered to members of any species, let alone to humans. Liam felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. All because I compared particles to fish. No, Professor Zixtrel corrected. Because you've demonstrated a way of understanding physical systems that is distinctly human and potentially valuable. Humans may be newcomers to galactic science, but you bring a perspective that the rest of us lack after thousands of years of development. Perhaps that is precisely what we need. 6 months later, Liam stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Science Council headquarters, looking out at the spectacular view of the spiral arms of the galaxy. The massive space station orbited at the exact center of the Milky Way, a location chosen for both its symbolic significance and its useful vantage point for astronomical research. He still found it hard to believe that he was here not just as an intern, but as a research fellow contemplating the vastness of space. Mr. Carter? A familiar voice asked. Liam turned to see Professor Zixtrel. Approaching, the Veltraxian had arrived at the station 2 days ago to present his latest research findings and to check on his former students' progress. Just thinking about how much has changed since I solved your puzzle, Liam replied. 6 months ago, I was just a student with average grades. Now I'm helping develop new models for stellar dynamics. The professor's scales shimmered in the soft light. Your work has been well received. I hear Dr. Zenta speaks quite highly of your contributions to his department. Liam nodded. We've been applying what you called human intuitive physics to several long-standing problems. It turns out that looking for patterns similar to those found in Earth's natural systems can be surprisingly effective when modeling complex stellar phenomena. They began walking together along the curved corridor that encircled the observation deck, passing members of various species who were engaged in their own research and discussions. I've been invited to present at the annual symposium next week, Liam said. I'll be discussing our new approach to modeling solar flares using principles derived from Earth's weather patterns. Professor Zixtrel's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. That is a significant honor for someone so new to the Council, especially for a human. You should be proud. They stopped at a junction where the corridor branched off toward the research laboratories. A group of young aliens from various species was gathered nearby, watching them with obvious curiosity. It appears you have admirers, the professor observed. Liam glanced at the group and smiled. "They're students in the junior fellowship program I've been mentoring them in some alternative approaches to physics problems, showing them how to look for patterns and rhythms, instead of just calculating everything. And how have they responded to these human methods?" "Better than I expected," Liam said, "especially the younger ones. They haven't fully committed to the traditional mathematical approaches yet, so they're more open to trying different perspectives." One of the students, a young Gorgon with iridescent skin, approached them hesitantly. "Excuse me, Mr. Carter, but we were wondering if you could show us that spinning technique again, the one you used to solve the stellar oscillation problem." Liam nodded. "Of course, let's go to Lab 3. It has the best holographic projectors for this kind of demonstration." As they walked to the laboratory, Liam reflected on how much had changed, not just for him personally, but for human standing in the galactic community. When he first arrived at the council headquarters, many of the senior researchers had regarded him with skepticism or even disdain, assuming his fellowship was merely a political gesture toward the newcomer species. But as his approach began yielding results in previously stalled research areas, attitudes had gradually shifted in the laboratory. Liam activated the central holographic projector, bringing up a simulation of a star with unusual oscillation patterns that had defied traditional analysis. The traditional approach to this problem is to model each layer of the star separately, calculating how energy transfers between them, he explained to the gathered students. "But when I first saw this, I was reminded of something we have on Earth called a Chladni plate." He adjusted the simulation to show a flat plate with sand scattered across its surface. "When you vibrate this plate, the sand forms different patterns depending on the frequency. This happens because the plate has natural resonance frequencies where some areas move while others remain still." The young Gorgon's skin flashed with colors indicating excitement. "And you realized the star was doing something similar?" "Exactly," Liam said. "Instead of thinking of the star as layers transferring energy, I thought of it as a resonating system with standing wave patterns. Once we applied that perspective, we could predict the oscillation patterns that had seemed random before." He demonstrated by adjusting the simulation, showing how the apparently chaotic behavior of the star's surface could be modeled as overlapping resonance patterns similar to those on the Chladni plate. The key insight was to stop thinking about it as billions of individual reactions and start seeing it as a single system with its own rhythms and patterns. Liam continued, "Humans are good at this kind of pattern recognition because we evolved to survive in complex natural environments, where quick approximations were often more useful than precise calculations." After the demonstration, Professor Zixterol accompanied Liam back to his quarters. "You have become quite the teacher," the professor observed. "Those students were deeply engaged with your explanation." Liam smiled. "I learned from the best. Your puzzle changed everything for me, Professor. It showed me that sometimes the solution isn't about calculating harder, but about seeing differently. That is precisely why I believe humanity has such potential in galactic science." Zixterol replied. "Most spacefaring species follow similar developmental paths, becoming increasingly reliant on computation and abstraction. But humans maintain this connection to pattern recognition and intuitive understanding even as your mathematical abilities advance. It gives you a unique perspective." Later that evening, Liam received a message from Admiral Lewis back at the Sol System Alliance Academy. She informed him that, inspired by his success, the Academy was developing a new curriculum that emphasized both traditional mathematical physics and what they were now calling intuitive systems analysis. Professor Zixterol had agreed to help design the program during his next visit to Earth. The message ended with news that made Liam especially proud. Several other human students had been accepted to positions at various galactic institutions based partly on the reputation he had established for human intuitive problem-solving. As Liam prepared his presentation for the upcoming symposium, he reflected on how a single puzzle had changed, not just his life but potentially the future relationship between humans and the wider galactic community. The orbital labyrinth had been designed to test mathematical precision, but by solving it with a spin move, he had demonstrated something that many advanced species had forgotten: The value of seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. The next morning, Liam met with the Council's Director of Research, an ancient Veltraxian named Elder Curvex, who had initially been among the skeptics of human potential. Your presentation has been moved to the main hall, the Elder informed him. Attendance requests have exceeded our expectations. I didn't expect so much interest, Liam admitted. Elder Curvex's scales rippled thoughtfully. When a new perspective yields results, others take notice. Mr. Carter, your approach has helped solve several problems that resisted traditional analysis for decades. That generates interest regardless of which species developed the method. As they parted ways, the Elder added something that made Liam pause. Perhaps the greatest contribution humans will make to galactic science is not a specific discovery, but a reminder of what many of us have forgotten, that there are different ways of seeing the universe, and sometimes a simple spin can reveal patterns that endless calculation cannot. Liam smiled, thinking back to that day in the zero-gravity chamber when he had watched the orbital labyrinth and seen not just a puzzle to be calculated, but a dance to be joined. Sometimes the most advanced solution wasn't the most complex one, sometimes you just needed to spin